Welcome back. You're watching Business Insight. And of course, we are live from Broadcasting House here in Nairobi. I told you my Twitter handle is @Brian Kimani. And of course, tonight we want to look at the manufacturing sector under the government Big Four agenda. Manufacturing is one of the agenda outlined where the government plans to lay more emphasis on how to develop these. And of course, the plan is to jumpstart manufacturing and of course increase its contribution to GDP from the current 9% to around 15% by the year 2022. If you look at your calendar, we're talking about less than 3 years from now. The question is, what do we need to do in order to leapfrog manufacturing? Well, let's first of all have some very interesting data about manufacturing elsewhere in Africa and of course here in Kenya. We want to have a look at share of manufacturing value added in selected African countries. And here we want to focus on South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, among other countries. And of course, your guess is as good as mine. South Africa, of course, will lead the continent with a manufacturing value added share of about 20% of their GDP. And bearing in mind that South Africa is a big economy, which is about 600 billion US dollars, you'd realize that definitely their value added, their share of manufacturing is definitely bigger. And of course, coming up second is Egypt, and Nigeria comes third with about 18%. These are figures for 2017. Morocco comes in fourth with a share of about 8%. Of key interest for us here is Kenya. Look at it here, lying in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In position 7, with a contribution of about 6%. That's quite low, if you ask me. And of course, seated next to Kenya is Cote d'Ivoire with about 5%. And of course, remaining countries in Africa, and of course, it's good to bear in mind that Africa, there are about 55 countries. The rest, their contribution or their value is about 15%, which is significantly small by our standards, if you are to ask me. Let's have a look at the next slide. Very good. Let's now compare regions. We were looking at countries. Let's now go regional. And Sub-Saharan Africa, look at it here. My goodness, pretty small here, with less than 1%. Jesus Christ. And of course, you have Middle East there coming up second with about 3%. Europe and Central Asia with about $6,000. This is not actually a percentage, but this is $6,000. Their contribution is about $6,000. Latin America and Caribbean, we're talking about almost $1,000 there. And of course, East Asia and Pacific jumping all the way to about $4,000. OECD countries, look at here we are, almost $7,000. This is regional comparison of manufacturing value added. And these are figures for 2017. And of course, these are not my figures, but figures from the United Nations. Well, I told you tonight we want to focus on manufacturing. Probably, maybe you didn't listen to this, but of course, the big interview is coming up next. Stay right here. My guests are already in the studio. Dr. Gacheri Thuku is the CEO of Sheth Naturals, joining us here. Gacheri, thank you very much indeed for your time. And of course, seated next to Gacheri is Johnson Adera. He is the Legal and Enforcement Director at Anti-Counterfeit Agency. Thank you very much, Johnson, for finding time to be with us here. I want to find out from you, Gacheri, first of all, do you think it's possible, first of all, to leapfrog manufacturing's contribution to our GDP from the current 9% to about 15%, bearing in mind that we have become an importing nation?
I think it is possible because 8.4% actually is the figure. Is pretty low when we look at it in terms of what we've been able to do before. Because in 2011, we were at 11.8. And so it's actually that we've gone down. We're actually dropping in terms of what we are able to do against the GDP from the manufacturing industry. So if we actually made things right in certain areas, we should be able to get to a 15. It's not too ambitious.
Help me understand, if we make things right, what exactly do you mean? What do we need to do right?
A number of things will be ailing the manufacturing industry, and I think the biggest one of them that we need to think about even before fixing anything else is fixing corruption.
Corruption.
Because if most of these things that we have, it's that there are so many people closing down industries at the moment, and basically it's because we are unable to curb the issue of corruption. There will be corruption right from the beginning of the chain of manufacturing to the very end of it. Before we even start thinking about policies, because if we are thinking policies, which is the other thing that we have not been very good at, we're good at making policies and making them very theoretical, but in terms of practicing them and ensuring that they're pragmatic, then we are not. So if we fixed corruption and then moved to the level of policies, I think we should be able to get to the 15% we're talking about by 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hold your thoughts there. I'll be coming back to you shortly, but I want to go to Johnson. From where you start or sit, what do you think?
I think we are on the right track.
To where?
The right track to achieve the government agenda of moving manufacturing to 15% of GDP. And the government has put in place very many measures to ensure that that is achieved, to support investors in this country, to ensure that people can set up industries, and that those industries, once set up, can thrive. And the government is steadfast on this, and these are cross-cutting issues. You find different ministries working together, different departments working together to ensure that this is achieved, and it is going to be achieved.
I mean, you're talking about, government setting up, the necessary environment, for manufacturing to thrive. I want first of all to focus on the Anti-Counterfeit Agency. I mean, you've been around now for almost 10 years. How then did we get to a point whereby almost 40% of all goods in the Kenyan markets are counterfeited? Where were you, and how did you allow this to happen?
Yes, you are right. We've been in existence from 2010. So we are doing 8 years, almost 9 years. And before that, we were not there. So counterfeit goods were coming into the country. When we set up in 2010, we've been building capacity in terms of setting ourselves up at the border points, in terms of employing more people to deal with the detection and seize of counterfeit goods. And right now we've reached a point where a lot of impact is being felt from last year. If you remember, with the multi-agency team, a lot of things were done. The momentum has been continuing, and the government has appreciated now and supporting the idea that there should be a multi-agency approach to fighting counterfeiting. And different institutions are working together to ensure that that is achieved. You'll find that at the entry points, Kenya Revenue Authority, Kenya Bureau of Standards, Anti-Counterfeit Authority are working together, and the police, and many others.
The problem, I mean, that is always cited by many players in the industry is this, that a lot of these agencies, from ACA to KEBS, they are mostly reactive. They are chasing out culprits out of the market instead of stopping these goods, from coming into the market. And I want to support my argument with figures with data. Before 2010, a percentage of counterfeited goods in the Kenyan market was about 22%. As we are talking now, even with the setup of ACA, you're talking about 40%. Were we better off without ACA, by the way?
Not really. What you have to appreciate is that counterfeiting is a crime. And persons who engage in counterfeiting are also innovative. And there are very many ways by which they try to beat the system. And that is why recently the government has been proactive in dealing with the influx of counterfeit goods in the market. And the proactivity has been in terms of, as I've mentioned, the issue of multi-agency approach. There's the issue of dealing with the laws. We've done amendments to the laws because we realized that the laws that were in place then could not deal with certain emerging aspects of counterfeiting. For instance, people coming in with just bringing in different parts of a good, which are then packaged into this country. For instance, flat boxes. One person brings flat boxes separately in one container. Another person just specializes in labels. And then once those things are in the country, they are able to come up with goods. And we've changed the law to deal with that.
To deal with that.
Yeah.
I'll be coming back to you shortly, but I want to come back to Gacheri. I mean, I want you to tie in the issue of corruption and the question of expanding manufacturing.
Okay. So the biggest issue that we've had in terms of expanding is how are the government agencies and institutions supporting the manufacturers locally. And we have people who are qualified in office, but they do not give that which they're supposed to give from the offices that they sit in. And what you realize is most of the time the reason that does not happen is because people are quick to pick bribes as opposed to ensuring that the right thing is done. So you realize that and especially when we talk about the smaller people that are playing in the field, the SMEs, who tend to actually contribute the most, are the ones that are suffering when we talk about corruption the most, because those are the people who suffer because they're not able to give the kind of bribes that are given out at certain levels of the manufacturing chain. So my assumption is if we are able to fix the corruption bit, then we should be able to ensure that the SMEs grow, because what we need is most of the people that are not within the SME level are actually not Kenyan companies. They're actually multinational companies. So what you want is to encourage the Kenyans themselves that are within the country, the locals are able to take up manufacturing. But what you realize at the moment is actually as we speak about the manufacturing agenda being something that should be taken up by everybody, about 22 counties are the ones that are actively involved in manufacturing. So then we are talking about 25 counties not being involved in the manufacturing agenda. And we are talking about, like the president quoted in his speech last year during the Jamhuri Day celebrations, he said we are looking at having a shared approach and growth by ensuring that manufacturing is working. But it's not shared anymore because then if we are not including the 25 counties and only 22 counties are working in manufacturing, then we are not encouraging manufacturing. The only way to be able to encourage is to ensure certain things are working. For example, ensure that there is competitiveness within the country locally and within the region.
Very well. Tell me this. I mean, it takes two to tango, definitely. You are here saying how the public sector is corrupt, and that is information in the public domain. But how corrupt is also the private sector in Kenya?
To be very honest, I think it's an issue of how policies are done and applied. Done is not the issue, applied is the actual issue, because the policies are there, but in terms of how then are they applied in ensuring that this doesn't happen? Because what happens is from the public sector, who are actually supposed to be implementing government policies, because the private sector carries on from where the public sector lives, because the public sector is definitely driven by people employed by the government. Then the private sector has no option but to pick up from where the public sector lives. And that leaves you at the point of you have no option but to play within what is available within the system. And so you will find the private sector playing along because you are in business to ensure that you make money. And the only way for you to be able to make money is if you part with that bribe, probably. If the public sector ensured that the government policies actually followed to the letter and that these are strictly done, then we shouldn't have a problem in the private sector as well.
Tell me this. I mean, the man sitting next to you is actually the man in charge of legal and enforcement at the Anti-Counterfeit Agency. Do you have faith in ACA, by the way?
I will be kind to him, but I also
don't be kind. I want you to be brutal. I want you to be brutal with honesty.
I think we are honestly not doing well in terms of the war against counterfeit products, because...
Gacheri, the question is this: do you have faith as a manufacturer? Do you have faith, or are you confident that ACA is fighting this menace?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, because...
Johnson, that's a very harsh verdict on your end. Eh? What would you say?
I was trying to be kind.
We don't want you to be kind, we want you to be honest, actually. Yeah?
No, we are doing a lot.
Johnson, that's a very harsh verdict. Eh?
Yes, but it's nice. We welcome criticism, we welcome divergent views and opinions, but we are doing quite a lot.
What is a lot?
Now. A lot in terms of seizures. Of late, you've seen that we are seizing a lot of goods at the ports.
Yeah.
A lot of goods at the ports. In ICD, we are seizing a lot of goods. In Mombasa, we are seizing a lot of goods. And
so that's being reactive, right?
We are being proactive because we are the ones who are checking these containers.
If you are proactive,
yes,
we will not be having these goods in the Kenyan market. We'll be having them being seized at the port of Mombasa, at Moyale border post, and all the other border posts. Instead of raiding go-downs in Nairobi, Mombasa, or wherever, to arrest these goods, honestly.
No, we are seizing them at the ports. And ICD, Inland Container Depot, is a dry port.
How do you allow them to get all the way to Nairobi?
You see, when goods come, it depends on where they're going to be cleared, because the importer has to indicate where he wants the goods cleared. You can indicate that they'll be cleared at Kilindini port. So we'll check it there. And if they're counterfeit goods, we'll seize them there. You can indicate that they'll be cleared at ICDN, Inland Container Depot in Nairobi. And we'll check it there, because that is the first point in the country where those goods will be checked. And that is being proactive, because we are not waiting for the manufacturers to lay complaints with us.
Gacheri doesn't appear to be agreeing with you, actually. She's nodding.
Because she's a local manufacturer. So she
has to be international.
Yes. You see, we have a lot of counterfeit goods that come from outside the country. And that is our first biggest problem.
Which is our biggest source of counterfeited goods? Do we have an idea?
From our data, it's China.
It is China?
It's China.
So what are we doing from the Chinese end?
What we are doing is that, and that's why I'm saying the government is being proactive, we are trying to enhance the pre-verification of conformity, the PVC system, so that issues to do with counterfeiting can also be dealt with at the country of origin. So we are now working, in fact there's even a big meeting tomorrow, to work out on enhancing that system so that issues of counterfeiting can be dealt with there. So they will be checked there for counterfeiting, as opposed to now that they're only checking for standards. So we hope that when this thing is rolled out, we've been given a very tight timeline by the government to roll it out. We intend to have a situation whereby counterfeit goods will not leave those countries of origin.
Johnson, help me understand this. The reason why we have seen some heightened activity around, dealing with counterfeits is because of the multi-agency team. Yes. What happens after, because this is not going to be a permanent team, at some point it will have to be disbanded. What happens thereafter?
What the government is doing is, first of all, to have systems in place to ensure that this thing can be self-sustaining. And one of them, as I've said, is to enhance the PVC system to deal with counterfeit goods. The other one is to enhance the country, to have all agencies can access the country system, so that there could be better intelligence gathering, there could be better targeting for counterfeit goods or containers with counterfeit goods, and also to ensure that there is a lot of sharing of information among government agencies. These are things that will be self-sustaining, and that is a system that is being put in place by the government.
Gacheri, if you were ACA, what would you first of all do right?
I think I'd just ensure that we get them right at the source, where we are receiving the goods, because we have so many of them in the market actually at the moment. There are times when you knew that there were certain places in Nairobi, for example, that had counterfeit goods. It's not the case anymore. Nowadays, even mainstream places like supermarkets have counterfeit goods.
Yeah.
You do not expect to be finding counterfeit goods in a supermarket. Those are one of the most trusted places to be shopping. So I wish this could be done from away, like at the port where we receive the goods, because the minute they're in here trying to run around River Road and wherever else seizing counterfeit goods is reactive, as you put it. Really, I think we need to do better in terms of being proactive. Yeah.
Tell me this, Gacheri. I mean, according to the manufacturing barometer research that was done by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they found out that 47% of those surveyed operated at about half capacity, 33% operated at 75% of installed capacity, and a fifth operated at near full capacity. This definitely is a very sad reality on the ground. Why is this the case?
I think the main problem, though, we are facing is first our energy, to be honest.
Energy?
Yes, beginning from energy, because it's a big issue when it comes to manufacturing. Is it quality? Is it reliable? Are we actually talking about it being able to support is it affordable?
Unless you're talking about the issue of affordability, because when you look at the installed power capacity in this country, is almost 3,000 megawatts, and when we are operating optimally, we are doing about 1,700. So we have about a reserve of about 1,200, that goes unused at any given point.
Affordability is actually the
affordability is the
that
issue.
We have, and it's actually what is putting the manufacturing industry in Kenya at a very it's not competitive at all. In terms of when we look, for example, let me give within the region of East Africa. Let's say in my industry, in my sector where I am, that is in cosmetics. Uganda just the other day did not have much cosmetics going on, but suddenly they have done so well and their products actually doing better in the market. We are actually at a disadvantage of cost in terms of how the region is operating at about 12%. So when you're putting out goods in the market, they are way higher priced than the people we are competing with in the region. So you realize actually people like Uganda, who used to do a lot of exports, we used to export to, we're actually declining. Tanzania, for example, we have completely declined. We've actually been passed completely by the USA and the UK, the Netherlands. We're actually doing badly against, and it's basically how affordable are the inputs. And then the other thing, again, not just the input of energy, we're also talking about the imports, raw materials that we use. The cost is so high. It's almost impossible to import right now. Most manufacturers actually holding onto importing instead of importing. You just wait. So what does that mean? There's very little manufacturing.
Why are they expensive?
Going on. It's actually taxes.
Because of taxes?
It's because of taxes. The taxes at the moment are so high. It is, and it's the reason, to be honest, everybody is closing left, right, and center. So it's one thing for us to say that we are supporting the manufacturing industry.
Do you have anybody who has closed that you know?
I know several people who've closed. I mean, the data is there.
Have they closed because the market is very competitive and they cannot cope, or they have closed because the market is very hostile?
Both hostile and too competitive, because our macroeconomic environment is actually not exactly conducive for manufacturing at the moment. There will be things that need to be done and fixed for us to be talking about an environment that is supportive of the manufacturing sector. In terms of competitiveness, as I have told you, it's not. In terms of how we are relating with against the rest of the countries in the region, we are not competitive. And for that reason, exports, for example, which are supposed to be doing very well to be able to expand the industry, are doing badly. And it's because when you look at the people you are exporting to, then they have the same products at cheaper. Why do they need to get the products from you?
Good.
Yeah.
Because we're completely squeezed off time. Johnson, I want you to give the people of Kenya, some hopes that sometimes in the future we shall look back and enjoy a Kenya, a counter-free Kenya?
Yes, we will. We are putting a lot of measures in place to ensure that we deal with...
And what are some of these measures?
One of them is to tighten border measures, both using technology and enhancing human capacity, so that we keep counterfeit goods out of the country first. Then we will now deal with internal counterfeiting, manufacturing of counterfeit goods within the country, which is also an emerging area. Because we believe that once we starve the counterfeiters of imports of counterfeit goods, definitely we'll have a bit of manufacturing of counterfeit goods within the country. So we intend to do that, and the measures we have put in place, the laws that we have now in place, and that we also intend to revise more, are robust enough to ensure that the manufacturing sector will be protected from counterfeit goods. Yes. And we also request the private sector to support us.
The private sector to support you?
To support us in the fight against counterfeit.
Absolutely. I mean, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers has come up with serious, especially the document that they have developed recently, the Manufacturing Priority Agenda for 2019. And I think he will agree with me that even the multi-agency approach the Counterfeit Authority is talking about actually came from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the agenda for 2018. So we are supporting them from our point of where we are in the private sector, but I think the government needs to prioritize and be more deliberate about ensuring that the manufacturing agenda is actually achieved. Because like you have seen in the data that you were giving right there, the countries that seem to be doing better in terms of economy are actually the countries that have prioritized manufacturing. Because out of the Big Four agenda, if you look at it, for example, the only one that can be able to ensure that we get immediate short-term and medium growth in the economy is actually manufacturing.
It's manufacturing.
So I wish we will be more deliberate and more pragmatic. I'm seeing East Asia there and the Pacific. The other day they were nowhere. And right now, by just being pragmatic in the approach in terms of the policies, they are doing so much better. The Japans and the Taiwans of this world, why wouldn't we want to be there?
Absolutely.
And I think that's President Kenyatta's dream. So I hope that the people that are implementing these things can ensure that his dream gets achieved just as he has wanted to put us in the map that I'm seeing right there.
It's the desire of each and every one of us that we're going to jumpstart manufacturing in this country. Thank you so very much indeed for your time and insight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you have been watching Business Insight and of course discussing manufacturing. We're taking a short break and thereafter we'll be back with more stories. Why don't you stay right here?